Well, hello, my friends. Welcome to me, your host, Christian Watson. So, my friends, there is this idea that is quite in vogue in many African American circles, particularly many left-wing African American circles. And it's the idea that 4th of July cannot be celebrated by African Americans or certain African Americans because of the so-called systemic oppression and lived experiences that satisfy the systemic oppression that many African Americans supposedly face. And so this argument goes something like this. This argument goes that the 4th of July is a sort of abstract celebration of an idea that has no coherence or no relationship to the actual condition of Black Americans and other people who have been historically, in their words, forgotten and besmirched by America or by the systems of this country. And so I just wanted, when I hear this argument, my soul weeps. My soul weeps because it is evidence of a mind that cannot contextualize atrocity and or a mind that conveniently forgets that one's own experience is not necessarily indicative of the area or country or principle of the country that they're born in. It's evidence of a mind that forgets that there is a world indeed that they live in that does not live within them. It is evidence of a mind that forgets that emotions and the pain we feel from those emotions are not always the guiding light where experience would do better. But I don't mean to insult anyone who holds these views. I want to actually engage with these perspectives and see how they actually work. And so one of the main arguments that are used by people who believe this, and this is an argument that was used in a Guardian article, is that America has had a lot of slavery, and there is still a lot of intersectional oppression that trans people, Black trans people, all kind of folks still face, and therefore it's hard to take pride in being an American. Now, there was an article written in USA Today which argues that Juneteenth and the 4th of July are actually coherent together, whereas the Guardian article argues that no, Juneteenth is the real Independence Day. And this is a sentiment shared by many African American leftists. And so the first problem with the perspective that Juneteenth is really the real 4th of July for African Americans is that whereas Juneteenth commemorated a particular, the alleviation of a particular condition, i.e. slavery, the American 4th of July commemorates not just the alleviation of oppression from the king, but the confirmation of natural truths, the confirmation of natural ideas by which human beings operate from. These natural truths are the ideas of freedom, access through reason, containing therein the value of human beings, and then being put into a political structure which works best for the composition of us human beings. So whereas Juneteenth is a temporal celebration, the celebration of the 4th of July is an eternal celebration, a universal celebration which applies to everyone. It applies to everyone. I mean, if we're going to contextualize the sentiments of African Americans through an event that many of them may not even have faced, then we're going to have to exclude a lot of other people who are indeed Americans. We're going to have to exclude indeed Hispanics. We're going to exclude Asians who may not have faced the slavery that many African Americans faced. And to do this is to make the idea of America an idea that is contingent and limited to physiology. But America is not contingent or limited to physiology. That would be like trying to make a tree a vessel of fire, whereas fire burns the tree. Trying to make America contingent upon skin color is basically going to burn and destroy the real idea of what America is. You may have the remains of a tree left after the fire is put into it, but the tree is destroyed. You may have an idea of America left, but it's not the original or the best or the most truthful idea of what America is. But also, it is a fundamental rejection of the dynamism of human beings to bind African Americans to a static historical position. It is a fundamental rejection. Slavery has been gone for so many years. And while we can have a debate over the impacts of slavery or whatever, we cannot say that human beings are forever firmly affixed to that event, which many happen before their own existence. This is the idea of using time not as a linear tool, but seeing time as going in many different directions, and then using time to sort of have outrage over what happened to people who look like you, and then embody that outrage and see that out and use the outrage as a lens to see modern atrocities too. If you use slavery as a lens by which to see modern day things that may not be very pretty, you're going to still see slavery everywhere. You're going to see a sense of slavery everywhere. And this is the problem with the Guardian article, is that it still sees a kind of bondage and domination everywhere by using the idea and explicitly quoting the idea of Kimberly Crenshaw's intersectionality. Once again, it binds dynamic human beings to a static historical position, and by doing that, it neglects, A, the historical progress that America has made since then, with the revocation of black codes, the implementation of federal anti-discrimination laws, with the abolition of Jim Crow, with the increase of the Constitution's rigid protections for African Americans and everyone, really, with every single advancement we make is destroyed when we still bind African Americans to a position that's long before their time. And it is a fundamental rejection of the dynamism of their human nature. But then Frederick Douglass is oftentimes invoked by a lot of people who want to make the case that America is still an evil country, or that America is not really a place for black folks. And his speech, "What is the 4th of July for the Negro?" is oftentimes invoked. So I just want to read a part of that speech that is oftentimes neglected by very, very, very many people. And the part of that speech goes something like this. He says, after he paints the idea of what the 4th of July is to the American slave, he says, "Allow me to say in conclusion, notwithstanding the dark picture that I have this day presented of the state of the nation, I do not despair of this country. There are forces in operation which must inevitably work the downfall of slavery. The arm of the Lord is not shortened, and the doom of slavery is certain. I therefore leave off where I began, with hope, while drawing encouragement from the Declaration of Independence, the great principles it contains, and the genius of American institutions. My spirit is also cheered by the obvious tendencies of our age. Nations do not now stand in the same relation to each other that they did ages ago. No nation can shut itself up from the surrounding world and trot around in the same path of its fathers without interference. The time when this such could be done, long established customs of a hurtful character could formally fence them in and do their evil work with social impunity. Knowledge was then confined and enjoyed by the privileged few, and the multitude walked in on mental darkness. But a change has now come over the affairs of mankind. Walled cities and empires have become unfashionable. The arm of commerce has borne away the gates of the strong city. Intelligence is penetrating the darkest corners of our globe. It makes its pathway over and under the sea, as well as on the earth. Wind, steam, and lightning are its chartered agents. Oceans no longer divide, but link nations together. From Boston to London is now a holiday excursion. Space is comparatively, annihilated. Thoughts expressed on one side of the Atlantic are distinctively heard on the other. Douglass was predicting the interconnectedness that would happen when the fruits of human progress were ripped from the soil and put out into society. And this was in the 1850s. This is when the telegraph was around. He lived in a world without the airplane, without the internet, without the dynamic interconnectedness of this globe. Douglass predicted that the principles of America, because they were benevolent, would immediately bear fruit the moment people broke free from their conditions, the moment people had this sort of intellectual curiosity that went beyond the current point in time, the moment people had faith. America is the product of faith. You don't go up against a king and fight a king who has a massive navy, who has a massive army, without having some faith in your ability. Because the evidence at that point would say, hey, you're not going to do this, it's not going to work well. But the faith Americans had, the tact Americans had in their freedom, is what allowed them to power through those many hard battles. What allowed them to power through after the country was established, the War of 1812. It's faith. America's foundations are foundations of faith. And Douglass had faith in America. Even if you couldn't see it, he had faith in America. Yet the perspective that tries to weaponize Douglass's opinions against the moral goodness of America is a perspective that not only lacks faith, but believes that faith is not sufficient for action. that faith needs to be put aside, and we need to go in and enact policies to fix America. But of course, we should understand this as well. Appealing to Frederick Douglass or any other historical figure as a means of establishing any truth is an appeal to authority. It is fallacious because it is not true because Douglass says it, or I say it. It is true because on the merits, it is logically sound. So the merits of what Douglass is saying are true, not because he said it, because they're logically sound. So we have to stop the tendency of quoting people who are influential, who carry some social weight, as a means of winning arguments that only manifest through them incidentally. The arguments are not Douglass's. They're coming through him like a vessel. Human beings are vessels for ideas. And finally, my friends, there's this idea that America and Juneteenth coincide because of the American principles are conducive to racial justice. Well, let me understand something. America is predicated upon the freedom of the individual. And the freedom of the individual is caked around the idea of natural law. And the natural law has a natural justice, which simply says we respect your rights, we follow proportionality, and we make sure that every interaction in the justice system respects your rights. Now, of course, American criminal justice system has kind of deviated away from the idea of natural justice, but the idea of racial justice is a kind of equitable justice, which focuses on the physiology of the victims, not their inherent human value, not the fact that they have rights, but the fact that they have been oppressed, or they have been allegedly oppressed. They may have certain disadvantages in life, and they contextualize those disadvantages, which may very well be disadvantages that are found in nature that just arise spontaneously as evidence of oppression. So to endorse racial justice and try to use the American framework to establish foundations for racial justice is to reject the American framework, is to reject an objective idea of justice, and I dare say it is to reject a fair idea of justice, because justice cannot be dispensed if we are constantly evaluating and solely evaluating the conditions and appearances of those who it is being dispensed for. It can only be dispensed if we have a blind, universal sense of what justice means. So, my friends, whenever you hear that that 4th of July is not for black folks, think of the strides America has made. Think of the principles that America is built upon. Think of the principle that the 4th of July confirms, and then understand that such a belief is a heap of flaming nonsense, which needs to fall into the dustbin of obscurity and have no place in our discourse. May that idea that America is not built for black folks fall. May it obliterate, and may it be destroyed by the truth of what America is. Think on it. My friends, I love you. If you love me, please donate to me on Patreon, patreon.com/officialcwatson, or PayPal, officialcwatson@gmail.com, or locals.christianwatson.com, or even join my Discord, which is in the link down below. I love you guys so much, and please stay pensive. Happy 4th, guys.